Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Digital Nomad World weekly series. Today, we're going to be talking about the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad job search these days, especially for remote work, which is what, let's be honest, we probably all want. We would all prefer to be working from home, working from a beach, rather than going to the office. My guest today, she's actually returning to our show for the second time. She knows all about it, and we're going to hear her story that she just went through. Mary Grace Nguyen, welcome to the show.
Woohoo! Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing well, but I don't, when I think about a job search these days for anything, but especially remote work, I start to get clammy hands. I don't want to think about it. So Mary, let's dive right in. Can you share about your background and what kind of work you've had in the past? What kind of industries have you worked in, and what kind of companies have you worked for before all this job search bit started?
Cool. Yeah. So I am actually I'm a copywriter, and I've been a writer like ever since I had my journalism masters in 2015. Yeah, I was postgraduate in that, and I actually came from an IT recruitment background, which got me into what I do now, which is copywriting for the tech industries. But yeah, pretty much started freelancing from the pandemic, and that's when the remote work started. We all started working from home, and that's when there was so many jobs. It was, despite the fact there was a pandemic, there was so many freelance opportunities. It was insane. So I've been doing copywriting, I'd say, like properly, like 10 years, but I've had loads of jobs. Like I met Becky, our host today, as an English teacher in Japan. That's how we became besties. And I've also done classical music, theatre, opera, review writing. I had my own blog, so I managed that using WordPress. And as I was saying, I was an IT recruitment consultant before that. But then, yeah, I've been doing full on writing as a blogger, long form article writer, SEO, UX, all that since then.
Okay, so a wide range of experience, which I'm sure a lot of people come to the table with when they start their job search. And
Mm.
how I want to hear about your experience working from home, working remotely before you started this most recent job search. What happened? Why did you have to go back to the job search?
So, interestingly enough, the reason I had to go back to the job search was because I actually had an amazing remote job already. And unfortunately, that organization said you need to come back to the office, or everyone had to come back to the office, whatever that meant, 3 days a week in the office. And funnily enough, their headquarters was not even in London. It was actually an hour and a half outside of London. So that would have meant that I would have had to spend, let's say, £400, €450 a month in addition, and they weren't going to increase my salary on that. And well, as someone who loves remote working, we don't like to go to the office. So it was how do you say, impulsive reaction to say no, but I really had difficulties having to make that decision because I loved my team, I loved my boss, I loved the work, I loved the brand and content strategy that they had for the year, all these things. But that's why I was put in that situation where I actually had to go out and look for another remote job.
Okay, just to give a little bit more background on that, how long did you have that job? And if I understand what you're saying, they were asking everybody to start to go back to an office that was not in central London, and they were not
Mm,
going to increase the salaries or pay any more for people to commute to that location.
yeah. So I was in that job since March 2023.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just
It was
it's
tough.
unbelievable when a company just starts requiring that and they don't consider that people have moved. A lot of things may have happened because do you know how long they had their fully remote policy before they changed?
I think pretty much ever since the pandemic, it was, yeah, crazy. I think some jobs, like depending on what tier you were, like had different kind of restrictions. So if they were super senior, then you pretty much didn't have to come to the office as much as someone who was kind of in the lower band. That they had to come into the office like sometimes even 4 days a week, you know. Um, but yeah, I think this is a situation that we're dealing with a lot. Specifically, I can say this for the UK, so as you can tell, I'm from London, and I've been speaking to a lot of freelancers, copywriters who do permanent employment as well, and they've noticed that there's going to be this need to go back to the office, like even up to 4 days a week. That's a discussion that's going on. And I think that's probably going to be a discussion that's happening across the globe, or definitely in Europe and the US.
Yes, I've seen a lot of information coming through, like big companies like Amazon, Google, all these companies asking people to go back, and people
Mm,
being laid off immediately, let's say, if they don't agree to the terms. I mean, you
yeah.
were given a choice, just to let the audience know, you could have kept your job if you had gotten into the office.
Yeah, I could have. And this is the thing. It took me a while actually to come to that decision actually. So I like spent evenings like having to do a to-do list, like a pros and cons list. Like, do I do this? What, could I even move that? A couple of, times I did actually have a moment going, oh, maybe I could make it work. Could I go hybrid? Could I be? But ultimately I had that, you know, gut instinct that said, no, let's be honest, you really do love the flexible lifestyle. You enjoy traveling, meeting people, and you love having more that kind of work-life balance. So yeah, it was
Yeah.
tough.
Oh, I can imagine. So your last job ended in September 2024. And then what happened? Where did you go first to start looking for more work? What were you feeling?
What was I feeling? So um at the time I knew that when that happened, I said to myself, it happened around the last week of August where I finished the role, and I knew that I had the Nomad cruise coming. We were going to go to Japan. I said to myself, let's just try and like enjoy this time with the Nomads and focus on coming back to work once I've actually finished my travels. So I headed back to London after Japan, and I pretty much got my head down and I gave myself a bit of a routine. And you know, it's quite a it's quite a plan, Becky. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Yeah, we're all ready.
Okay, okay. So I kind of like wrote it down because it was quite a I had to write it down because I had to remind myself, how did I do it? So the first couple of things that I did was I had to have a plan. I got onto something called the what's it, the challenge. There's a 75 hard thing where people use it for fitness or health or eating better. I did it like a 75 hard kind of villain challenge. So what I did was I kind of like put myself in the character of like, what would a villain do? A villain is someone who has the vision of kind of like, a go-getter, whatever they want, resilience, tenacity. And my kind of passion was I need to find a remote job, and I'm not going to like give up. I'm going to keep on doing what I need to do. So the kind of things that I had to do was, I kept myself busy, making sure that I kept to that routine. And I said to myself, right, the plan is I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And on my to-do list was structuring that day. So having a journal every day from like kind of like things that I need to do, making sure I've got a checklist of what these things are and making sure I'm tracking them. So the things that I would do is like kind of like making sure that my CV was up to date, making sure that I had actually updated my portfolio. Did I need to add anything additional to my portfolio so that people can see like the work that I've done previously? Registering to job boards. So once I've updated my CV, registering to like job boards such as like Monster, Reed, Total Jobs, Job Site. There's loads of websites, and there's like tons for remote work, right? There's like hundreds of remote work job sites, and not just depending on LinkedIn, for example. Setting up email alerts for when those jobs come into your email box so that you can always check every day. Oh, if for me, it was like it's a copywriter or freelance roles coming in. Making sure that I was active on LinkedIn. I can't express how important it is to be doubling down on LinkedIn, because this is the number one for like networking and actually cold pitching to businesses or finding out who's looking for copywriters or freelancers or in general anyone. Because I can say this, so this is information that only someone that I would know, someone as a recruitment consultant back in 2010, and now it's 2025, I was using LinkedIn. And in 2010, LinkedIn was nothing like how it was today. It was just a directory of people's profiles and their jobs and companies and CVs, like their experience. So because I've used LinkedIn since 2010, I saw the value in how good it is in finding people, because that's what my job was. I had to find where the work was going or who was looking for work, finding those candidates, you know? So definitely like spending a lot of time on LinkedIn, posting, commenting, making sure I had testimonials, networking with people, people who I'd never met before, introducing myself. And then also part of my day would be, if I had an interview, preparing for that interview, you know, making sure that I had my questions and answers prepared, have any questions for them to ask, that kind of thing. So those are the kind of steps that I went through. It's quite a rigorous thing, but I made sure to stick to that plan no matter what, every day.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
sounds like the important thing was that you kept going. You didn't like just sit down and, start to like bed rot, as they say, and not take any action. It's
Yeah,
like the minute you lose your job, depending on your financial situation and your schedule coming up, of course, you need to stay at this and imagine, put that mindset, forward that you are going to have a job. And like you said, I am going to have a remote job. This is what I want. I am not going to settle for anything less.
exactly. Exactly. I think that's it. And even like small things like telling myself I need to do 5 applications minimum every day, like that, even that made me feel better knowing that I'd actually like met my quota for the day, as opposed to, yeah, bed rotting, sofa rotting, not doing something. Because it's easy to do that. You can lose the motivation, like, oh my god, I'm here like 2 months, I'm not hearing anything. It's very easy, but you have to kind of at least say that you've done some of these things today, and then you can go on with your day and try to keep yourself active. And remember, you know, sometimes job hunting can be just such a boring task. It's daunting, but you have to kind of keep at it, and you have to remind yourself, ultimately, you never know. Tomorrow you might get a request for an interview, or you might actually get straight up like, we like your work, we want you to do this. You don't even have to like have applied to it. People just find you because you've been doing all the stuff in the background, which was, for example, posting on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Yeah. So you were like for a while, you were literally applying to 5 jobs a day minimum.
Minimum, yeah. Some days I was like some days I applied and found 30 jobs, right? Or opportunities. Or when I say jobs, it's like projects, it's gigs, it's freelance stuff, or someone on LinkedIn posting something random like, is there anyone who can help me like review my CV and make my summary better?
Yeah.
That's a job, right? You know, for me as a copywriter, that's still the skills and expertise. You know, it doesn't have to be a full on kind of like, yeah, 12-month contract or anything like that. Small things like that. So just putting myself out there.
Yeah, and I know you also, after your travels were done, that you couldn't have predicted that you weren't going to have a job for when you booked the trip. You did go home, back to London. You were back at the source where you felt a lot of these jobs and interviews may happen. So I think that's important too. Go to the
Yeah,
closest place where you think you have the best time zone, perhaps, where you can, live on a very small amount of money so you can have a longer runway to get the next thing, right?
exactly. Yeah, definitely.
So, as you started searching, what starts to happen? Now, I do remember you sharing with me interview after interview, and every time you would have one, I would say, "This is going to be it. This sounds like the perfect job for you, Mary." And you would always temper my enthusiasm a bit because you started doing a lot of interviews and you weren't seeing results, right?
Yeah, it was pretty crazy. So some even say, like some recruiters were saying that the market was just as bad as the 2008 recession. Like that's how bad the market is for some recruiters, because you can imagine some hiring managers, they're kind of like, you know, clutching at straws to try and get a budget or something approved. They need, let's say, someone in digital marketing to do something for a project, but they can't because the company has no budget, and that's all down to the economy, right? So also a lot of recruitment companies, they're losing out on opportunities as well. But when I had interviews, you know, I do my best job, you know, always like make sure I prep, and I go to an interview and the hiring manager would sound very enthusiastic, or the client would sound like, yeah, you sound great. They would even send me the actual work in front of my face on this video call, and I'm like, okay, that's the work, yeah, I can make suggestions, almost like I was pretty much doing the job already, like I was in a work meeting scoping out the project. And then I'd get a couple of emails later on, I'd just be like, no, sorry, they decided that they're going to like pull the job or put the job on hold. And you're like, eh? What's just happened? Or I'm about to have a final stage interview, and then 2 days before that, they just say, actually, we're going to pull the job completely. that business have decided that they don't need this anymore, or they just all these kind of things, and you're just like, well, it's not it's not guaranteed as it used to be. It's not a thing that's for sure anymore. So that was one of the things, to kind of manage your expectations, come in with zero, like just do your best, but know that it can go either way, right?
Yeah, and we talked about this many times actually during your search. You were being given all of these tasks that were really time consuming
Mm,
to do for these
right.
clients. Sometimes it almost sounded like you had been hired as an intern that was never going to be paid. And then, of course, they
Mm.
wouldn't hire you. Can you talk more about that and how you noticed like this seems to be a trend that I mean, should you do these tasks when yeah, it seemed very difficult to say.
I think what would happen was some would even ask to do a video, and I think that's something that's a brand new trend now. I think in the last couple of years, having to do an intro video, which for some people they don't want to do that. That, like you say, it requires effort. And or when you're doing an application, right? They ask you, can you, with your CV, do a cover letter, but also can you answer these questions as well? And you're like, isn't that questions that you can just ask me at the interview? Right. So it just seems like nowadays a lot of clients or hiring managers, they're asking more than the usual. And I think a lot of it is down to the fact that they're also trying to make it difficult for people as well, which isn't encouraging. And it also reinforces how much that person who wants the job wants it. Because if they want it, they're willing to do it, right? But there are cases where some, like, companies or brands, they actually try to get the free work off you at the same time, and and you have to kind of weigh it out, go by your gut instinct. And on some occasion, I actually thought, well, I like this brand and they're asking me to do a task, which is probably something that I'd have to do in the job anyway. And if I don't get this job, at least I got the experience and I can shove it on my portfolio website, because technically speaking, it's actually my work, right?
It's
It
a good
is
way
your
to,
work.
yeah.
Yeah, it's your work ultimately. You can do whatever you want. And as a piece of advice, like for anyone who wants to get into a specific industry, when you're doing a portfolio, they always say, "Oh, I don't have any work. I don't have experience." You do it because you start mimicking work that already exists. So a lot of the time, people make portfolios based on stuff that they make up, right? In this situation, I was actually asked to do a task by this bank. I was asked to do this work by this energy company. Sorry, but as far as I'm concerned, even though I didn't get paid, I still did the job. So that's how I kind of weigh it out. There are some cases where I'll actually be like, no, I don't want to do the work, because I'm like, one, I don't want to do that. That's, you're asking way too much. And, you know, three, it's just like, I haven't got the job yet. And you just start getting a feel for it, but always go by your gut instincts and weigh out the pros and cons.
Yeah, and stick to your boundaries too, because it may not be the right fit for you in the end, even if you do get the job. If they're asking so much at the beginning, it's very hard to tell. But yeah, it depends on your mindset. So that's another question I have is like, how did you stay positive with all of these no's?
Mm, so coming from someone as a recruitment consultant, it's a bit of a sales job. So you'll get a lot of no's from that. I was I was like 26, 27 years old when I was a recruitment consultant. Now I'm 40. So I had to get a lot of no's. There was days when I'd go into bathroom and start crying. And, because they'd swear at you, they'd say no. And I learned to just become resilient, because ultimately, and this is really bad, but like, it's hard. This one's tough. You have to tell yourself, the longer you stay upset over something like that, of a no, it's going to take you longer to get money. You're basically letting money walk away by not picking up the phone and calling someone else.
Yeah.
That's why they always say in sales, it's a numbers game. You know that famous scene in Wolf of Wall Street? Pick up the phone. Why are you not picking up the phone? And in that scene, Leonardo DiCaprio was like, what? Because you're basically losing money by not picking up the phone, or just going and asking, taking that risk and just seeing, maybe they weren't thinking of buying, but what you have, they actually might be interested in, but you don't know until you actually ask. So that's kind of how I always see life in general now, if that makes sense. And there might be a no today, but tomorrow there might be 10 yeses. But because you're feeling upset about it and you're letting it get to you so much, you're letting those yeses go to someone else who's actually got the, how you say, the mindset.
Yeah. No, that's really good advice.
Mm.
So I'm also wondering if you're looking specifically for a remote job, what are some things to look out for when you're looking through the job descriptions that you're trying to apply for? I know really like not all remote jobs are created equally. You might be remote, but you're on a, you have to be on a certain time zone every time, or there's like certain hours where you've got to be connected to the network internally or not. So what did you look out for? What are some things we should be paying attention to?
I think it's one thing to pay attention to what a job description says, but it's another when you actually speak to the person who's hiring or actually looking for this would be freelancer or remote worker, right? Because you often find that some job descriptions they put remote, but actually there's only one day a week it's remote. Right? Some people just actually have a different idea of what remote means. And I think we need to be sensitive to the fact that not a lot of people have that opportunity or chance to kind of be in a remote position. Some people have certain skills that can only be done on site, you know. So if you, for example, are speaking to people, um, let's say for example someone who's Gen Z or Gen X, they are the type of people who actually would love to not have a remote job. They'd love to be hybrid or just be in the office more often. And someone like myself, who's a millennial or older, like boomers, we relish the fact that we don't have to face another glass door, an office glass door, you know. So when we are speaking to recruiters, I think we just need to make sure that, or hiring managers, we need to make sure that we are really clear on the fact that we want to be able to have a remote job where we don't have to meet a client face to face, or we don't have to be on site anywhere. I think we have to make that really clear in a conversation that you have, because this is how a lot of jobs go out there. They know that they can get the good talent, but they'd rather risk just making like a kind of boo-boo where they may say that it's remote, but in actual fact, the job is not remote. They just want to get you on the phone and they want to sell you the job. And I've had that many times where I'm like, yeah, but would you consider this? Would you consider like coming into the office like once a week, maybe twice, or yeah, or every 2 weeks? I'm like, yeah, you have to really be clear on that and understand why your motivations are for having a remote job, I'd say.
Yeah. And just when you talk to the managers, like you said, and you get them on the phone, you see how foreign a concept this is to them or not, how open they are to letting their employees have the freedom in a sense to work and get as long as they get the job done. Yeah, you can hear it in the voice.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just job descriptions are an interesting thing because sometimes they are completely not what the job is. And you go to the interview and you're like, this is not what was described in the job description. But the person who wrote the job description thinks that's what it is. So it's also about perception, which is why it's always good to have that conversation before having even an interview, maybe just making sure that you understand what the job role is. And most of the time, job descriptions, you only kind of like need 65% of what it's actually on the job description. Most of the time, a lot of clients, they don't know what they want. I've come across some job descriptions where they're like, we want a copywriter. And then it's like, we want you to have video editing skills, be really good at using Illustrator. We want you to be an SEO specialist that can do data analytics. It's like, wow, we are an octopus. Like, and you're going to pay us like really shitty rates. So it's always good to kind of do your own research and know exactly what you want. Have some non-negotiables.
Yeah. I think the other thing to look out for too is if a description says it's remote and it is, but you're not allowed to leave the country for tax reasons or something.
Yeah,
You can only be away for
exactly.
20 days a year or something out of the, IP geographical location or something like that.
I mean, this is really a hot tip, Becky. This is really, and I'm telling everyone who's listening here, okay, this is a real hot tip. Another one you could also do is when you're onboarding, you're actually still getting, like, let's say you've got a brand new laptop, or you're, let's, for me, for example, sometimes a lot of my clients, they give me a laptop and stuff like that. What I always do is I'm not having to speak to IT all the time to make sure I've got my login details and that stuff. And I'll just talk to the IT person and be like, do you guys like watch where we go and where we travel? And they're like, the last IT guy said to me, no, we don't. But yeah, I got to thinking about that too. Maybe I need to travel. Maybe I And I was just like, yeah, because you can. He's like, yeah, I've just been so lazy. I know that's in our contract that we can, but yeah, I should do that. But he's basically, you're getting the green light from them saying, no, we're not going to be following you anyway. We're not good. We don't have the resources or time to actually be looking and investigating where the hell you are anyway. But you just need to be really mindful of your taxes. For example, you need to be mindful of what you can get away with and what you can't. Like, really, it's just not worth it to get your company in any legal lawsuit or battle. It's just not worth the heartache. It's just a job. You can, like, it's a tough market, I say that, but some things are just not worth it.
Yeah, it's really important these days to be super clear upfront. This is what I am intending to do as a worker, remote. Is
Yep.
that okay with you? And is that going to be acceptable? Because you don't want to do this incredibly difficult job search and then be
Yep.
fired, let's say, a month later or laid off because it just wasn't a match for your, working styles.
Yeah, no, exactly. I think there was one time I was at Microsoft, and my boss was in Paris and I was in London. And then she goes to me, you can come to Paris if you want. Like, I don't mind if you come to the office. I don't mind. I didn't take the offer up. I didn't, just because I didn't have any time to come to Paris. But it was just nice for her to kind of say that. And just, this is the cool thing about remote work. It's just, you know, being able to kind of like go to different places and just being able to kind of like sometimes meet your client. You don't always have to like be in a certain place away from your client. You can always make it work. And I think that's one of the best things I love about remote work, is that you get to meet so many people internationally as well. So I could say that, oh yeah, I could have a remote job that's like kind of just working from home in the UK. But I don't know, like, I don't always want to like kind of like just be with UK people. I want to be with people who are like from Warsaw or from India or, America and Australia. I love that.
Yeah, I think a lot of nomads do. Okay, so
Mhm.
let's also talk about, because I know at one point and a lot of people struggle with this, you felt like, I hope I can say this, like your funds just felt like they were running out. You had this big trip planned to Japan. It was like you didn't expect to
Yeah.
not have money coming in during that time. So what did you do in the meantime, as you're looking for, a job and you didn't have any money coming in? Were you able to find little side projects or side income here and there?
Yeah, I did. I was very lucky in that. And again, like I said, it's had to do with LinkedIn, because I have my LinkedIn completely full to the brim. Like, every single patch or possibility that you have, all those components you have on a LinkedIn profile, we can actually fill it up with information. There's an area on the LinkedIn profile that's called services. And people say, like, oh my God, I've already put my resume, I've already done my headline, I've already done my bio. Why do I need to add more to my services? This is an actual another part where people can actually like find you out and actually request and make proposals of work that they can give you. This is how I found a client who, as I can say, I'm a remote copywriter. They were an organization in Dubai, and they wanted me to do their landing pages for their website. And I took on the job, and I've done it really well, and they were really happy with the results. But again, this is all from LinkedIn, and it was just a kind of 2-week project, and they've asked me for more work since then. But this was passive. I didn't apply for them. They found me because I had done my LinkedIn really well. So this is one of the things that I was saying, like, if you're looking for remote work, you can find it on LinkedIn, but you really need to make sure that you're visible to people so people can find you and actually pay you for your services.
Yeah, I know you're very happy about that in the meantime, until
Mhm.
we're going to give the spoiler alert now. You found a job. So,
Yay!
how did this finally happen? Where did you get the lead for the job that you got? And I know you don't have to name names about who you're working
Yeah.
for, but yeah,
Yeah.
how did you get this happy ending?
I believe interestingly enough, I think it might have been an email alert that I got first, right, on this job. It didn't have the client name at all, and I might have applied for it. But funnily enough, on the same day that I applied for it, the hiring managers for it actually got in touch with me, and I was like, did I apply? Did they find me because I applied, or did they just find me because they found my profile? I wasn't sure, and I'm probably yet to find out. But yeah, it started from December the 3rd, where we got in touch with each other. There was around there was four people involved in the interview process, but there were 3 stages, and I got the offer in February 3rd. So that was sorry, not an offer. That's when my start date was the 3rd. So pretty much that was a 2 month process. 2 months, from CV submission to doing the interviews to offer, right?
Wow.
That took some time, yeah. But in the meantime, don't put your eggs in one basket. I was looking for other jobs at the same time, keeping myself open to other opportunities should anything come in. But yeah, that's pretty much how I did it. That was one of the remote jobs where, in a crazy market as it is right now, that actually was 100% remote. And I was really glad about that. And I've had recruiters call me and be like, "Can you do this job? Can you do it?" Like, come into the office on site, like 3 days in the office, 4 days in the office. And I've always been like, no, that's not what I am. I'm only remote. Stick to that, and you'll be surprised. You'll get it.
Yeah, you weren't going to settle for anything less, which is interesting because we're still not going to name names, but there was another player that was kind of teasing
Yeah.
the job around the same time, right? But it had
Yeah.
different terms. Can you explain that and what happened with that?
Oh my God, it was crazy. So with that, I can say, I won't say names, but oh my God, I pretty much flew for this interview. It was a final stage interview. What was the crazy thing was, let's say I had the first initial interview on a Thursday. I had applied for the job, I think 2 months beforehand. So they took a long while. This is a big name, by the way, big player, globally known. And I had the interview on a Thursday. I was asked to come into the office, to come to the UK to actually do a face-to-face final stage interview. Unfortunately, 2 days before the actual interview, where I already had booked my flight, they had cancelled the interview because they said that they were changing the description of the job.
Like, what? After all that,
Yeah, this
what,
is
what you did? Why don't you share, Mary, what you did when this happened to you? Because most people wouldn't do this, and you got
yeah.
interesting results.
Okay, so if this ever happens to you, don't react immediately. Sleep on it, because things like that can be devastating. Some people are more sensitive than others, but it's still a reaction. It's unacceptable. It's unprofessional. Irrespective of whether or not you fly in for a job interview or you don't, it's
Of course, they
still
didn't
not
know.
right.
They didn't know you had flown in for it,
They
you know.
hadn't known. They hadn't known, but it's still, this is the reality of the market, and this is the reality of what some jobs can do. It's a two-way street, and there has to be kind of like a level of respect. And I think I slept on it because I was like, okay, this has happened. I couldn't process it at the time because it was late in the evening. It was like around 8 o'clock my time. I was just like, wow, okay. I was like, almost time for bed. I was just like, whoa, let me take some time to process this. And in the morning, what I did was, I posted about it on LinkedIn anonymously, not putting the name of the client of who this organization is. And then I actually directly emailed the head of recruitment for this organization. And I just basically poured out my upset, I was complaining and saying this was completely unacceptable. It's unprofessional, and considering the caliber and reputation this organization had, I would have expected more. To which they actually got back to me almost like within a few minutes, and they were like, "Can we have a call?" And the actual head of recruitment was very efficient. He was able to calm my nerves, and he actually apologized on behalf of the recruitment process and said, "This is not how we operate. Leave it with me. Let me figure out how this happened." and yeah, I'll give you some answers. And it was just nice for him to actually come in and say to me, this is how we're doing, this is wrong, and if there are any other freelance opportunities where you can do some writing for us, please let me know. Like, send me your CV, tell me you've applied for it, and I will fast track you. Which, let's be honest, he could just be saying that just to, you know, sweeten me up. But at the same time, it's still the fact that he was prompt with my complaining, my negative reaction, the fact that he wanted to do something on my behalf and apologize. That in itself is just a show of character of him, and him trying to be good about it and calm my nerves. That is, so yeah.
And you never know. He didn't know you, but if you had had that conversation and you struck a chord in him and there was a role that suddenly came up, you're going to be standing out in his mind because you stood up for yourself. And what you're asking for and how you reacted was not out of order in any way. This required, I think, a reaction.
Yeah, exactly. It did, I think. And you know, you can imagine there's a lot of people who wouldn't have done what I did, but I just thought, no, speaking as someone as well who was in recruitment consultancy like before, I thought, you know, this is as as recruiters, we have integrity, or we should be upholding some integrity values. Like, we should be honest and transparent about our processes. And I just felt this is not right. Does, you know, they can't get away with this, was the number one thing. I thought they can't get away with this. You've pulled me up and made me feel like, you know, I potentially could be a copywriter for this amazing organization, and yet you've really pulled the rug, literally. And you're not getting away with this. Like, you need to be told this is what's happening behind the scenes. And funnily enough, he had no idea what was going on, and he's slightly kind of rectified it for me anyway.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to highlight for everyone, because I think it's a good thing to keep in mind, the current job that you have, you were told by the organization that it was between you and one other candidate, and you were kind of like waiting to the last minute to find out which person had been chosen. And
Oh
why
yeah.
you in the end? They told you something specific, which can apply to all of us, I think.
A couple of things. They said to me that they liked that I was he said I wasn't that I'm not loud, but he liked that I was quite assertive, and someone who kind of would be good for bringing up challenges that might come up in a project or kind of scope of work. And I think it's important, as someone who's a specialist, to show that you can actually add real value to an organization. In my situation, I'd be working on their website, and so giving real value to their customers requires someone who's been a specialist in the field for over 10 years, observing the behaviors of a website. So someone who can actually stand up and be like, hold on, have you considered this? Have you considered that? And just having an extra lens, like being able to kind of give that fresh perspective. So yeah, that was quite nice to hear that I kind of can do that. And yeah.
Critical thinking is the part that AI is still working on. So that can be one of our differentiators. Especially, I know when you're a writer, you're terrified about what AI can continue to do and replace you and everything else. That's a whole other topic. But if we can stand out, if we be
Yeah.
energetic and show that we can bring value, like you said, it's going to really help you in this search.
Well, actually, Becky, there's something that I wanted to bring up. I actually went to a Copywriters Unite event last night in London, and this happens every month. So we meet up with other copywriters. And one of the things that we discussed, and I thought this was really interesting, is that, you know, AI can spew out words. It can write blogs, but it's not going to be the best quality, right? One thing that AI cannot do, and this I think you'll agree with, AI cannot understand what a customer wants.
That's true.
That's something that we can only find out, and that's, until AI can do that, it really cannot replace us. And that's one of the things I think, you know, humans only know what humans want, and that's the one thing that AI can't do. So until we're in that spot, we're actually fine. That's our
It's not
saving grace.
pretty. comforting for all of us to hear. The final thing I wanted to point out to everybody, and I think this is really cool what you're doing, is that you've said like I've got this new role, but now you have another plan on the side. Can you share what your goals are now that you've gone through this job search and what you learned that you may need to be doing in the meantime?
So what I'm doing is obviously talking about AI. I think I was upskilling. So let's making sure that I'm kind of like embracing it and making sure that I'm not going to be held behind, because I feel that partly some of the reasons why it was quite difficult was not just because of the economy, but also AI is kind of taking a lot of people's jobs, right? So I think as a project for myself, as a little hustle, is kind of like keeping abreast of like AI tools or AI in general and understanding where it's going. And so that's a kind of form of upskilling. But I've also just recently released an ebook called How to Become a Digital Nomad. So what I'm also going to be doing now is actually creating a guide as well, on how to get a remote job in 5 months. So
Right.
I'm kind of like, yeah, and this is kind of just part of that, this interview. So I'm going to be kind of like outlining the kind of instructions and to do points that I had, so people can also like try and find that, because it's something that a lot of people are trying to identify right now, like different ways, different methods. And networking is great, but once you start staying in the same circles, like you're kind of at a dead end. It's good to kind of like, stretch yourself a little bit of different alternative methods and see what's out there. So I'm going to be focusing on digital products on that kind of side, writing ebooks and helping people.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, anything we can also be getting. We learn this, of course, when we have nothing, no income coming in from our main job. To have that some passive income in any kind of way coming in is really helpful when you're on this, what can seem like a months long, endless search for the next
Yeah.
remote job. So, Mary, I
Mm-hmm.
want to thank you today so much for telling us like such valuable information, because we're all going to, hopefully, none of us listening have to face this, but the reality is we are going to have a job search in our future, most likely. And I actually have talked with Mary before on this channel about LinkedIn. So I'm going to put that link in our description. And also, Digital Nomad World has its own jobs board. I actually sent Mary some links from it while she was on her search. So we put new jobs out every week, and please have a look at the Digital Nomad World job board as well if you're looking for a job now, or if you're looking for more opportunities out there. Mary, is there anything else you would like to add before we go, including where people can follow you?
Um, if you want to find my book, How to Become a Digital Nomad, just click on my bio, and my Instagram are at Mary Goes Nomad, and my TikTok is remote underscore digital nomad.
Easy.
So, yeah.
Okay, well, Mary, thank you so much. It was a pleasure, and congratulations on finding your new remote job.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone. Woo
Thank
woo.
you.